Okay, so this is a quick video where I'm going to introduce a couple Illustrator basics, and then I'll show you how to do some basic line artwork in Adobe Illustrator. So I'm going to start off by creating a new document. Over here on the left, I'll click Create New. And then I want to go to, up at the top, you can select Web or Print if you want to do it by pixels or by inches or millimeters. In this case, I'm going to do it by inches, and I want to do an 11 by 17, which is also tabloid. I'm not sure why mine's in millimeters like that. Okay, so that's 11 by 17. I actually want it to be, landscape format. So I'll click the little orientation button, click Create. Okay, and then the other thing that I like to do, it's just what I'm used to, is up at the top where it says, I'm not sure what it'll say by default, but if you just click that little drop down there and go to Essentials Classic, that'll load a bunch of toolbars that I'll be using. And some of the stuff up here at the top so that you can follow along better. Now I'm just going to drag in the PNG that I saved. From a previous video here. So I'll just drag it in. The other way to put stuff into Illustrator is go to File, Place, and then navigate through your folders. So there's the image. I'm going to use it as a background. Again, you can see the background is cropped out because it's a PNG. Okay. So also over here on the right, you'll see that I have a Layers panel, just like in Photoshop. If you don't see that, you can go to Window, Layers. And I'm going to go ahead and create another layer, and that way I can kind of draw on top of it without accidentally moving it or messing it up or anything. So over here in the Layers panel, I'm going to click the little lock button next to my image, and that means I won't be able to mess it up in any way. Now, the way that Illustrator works is rather than, like with Photoshop, it works mostly with pixels and images. Illustrator works with what's called vector artwork. So you can draw like shapes and apply different, appearances to them. So if I draw this rectangle using the rectangle tool, over here on the left, you'll see I have what's called a fill and what's called a stroke. And the fill is obviously for the inside, and the stroke is kind of the perimeter. Now, if I wanted to select and make this an empty box, I could click the little white box with a red line through it. So now we can see I have just a box with a black outline. And then if I click on that black outline, I can change the color of it. Over here on the right, I have the colors panel. Again, if you go to Window, Color, that's how you open that. Also, you can expand and contract a lot of these panels by double-clicking on the label there. So I can make a different color to this box here. So yeah, I can also drag my little eyedropper there in the color wheel. Okay, so either way, I can adjust, like if I wanted to add fill now, I can adjust the color of that, et cetera, et cetera. And then the other aspect that I want to be able to edit is the thickness of that outline or the thickness of a line. And I do that in the stroke panel. So over here, next to the color panel, I have a stroke panel. Again, if you go to Window, you can find that. And where it says weight, I can change the thickness of that line or the line weight of that line up or down. I can also adjust a couple other things about it, like I can make the corners rounded or chamfered. I can also turn it into a dash line if I click dash line down below, and I can change some of these numbers if I want to. Whatever, etc. I'm not going to make this a dash line though. Okay, so if I'm trying to draw like an organic line or something that's not a kind of regular shape, again I can click on. I'm going to use the pen tool here. Now the pen tool can be used to draw, what you would call a polyline, meaning straight lines between points. If I just click over and over, delete that. Or it can be used to draw curves. So if I were to click and drag my mouse, you can see I have little handles that appear, and then I start to be able to adjust and create curves and stuff like that. So I could do that to kind of trace out curved line. You can also hit Control Z to go back, and let's say I'm done. I'm happy with that. I'll press Enter. So now you can see my cursor is no longer connected, I could start a new line at this point and do whatever. Or if I wanted to make adjustments to this original line, so I can select it with, there's two selection tools in Illustrator. One of them allows me to like grab it. I have to actually click on the line there, you can see. And I could resize the whole thing at once. I could scale it, like stretch it in either direction. Or if I wanted to edit it using the control points that I just drew, I can go to what's called the direct selection tool, which is a little, that's my little white arrow here. And then if I click on any of these points, you can see the little grips appear again, and I can make adjustments to that. There we go. And so then what I could do is have this kind of set in a position, and I'll change the opacity of it and stuff like that. And of course, I could also go ahead and change the opacity of my original image just to make it less. Gotta select it first. Up at the top, I go to opacity and slide it. If you don't see opacity up at the top, you can also open what's called the transparency panel over here. Again, that's under Window and Transparency. If I select on it there, I can also change my opacity there. Okay, so, and then what I'll go ahead and do is like make another line that kind of represents the stitch going the other direction. Lock that again. I can also temporarily lock this, so I can select it and go to Object, Lock selection, there we go. And then I can just unlock it later, but I'll make another line real quick here where I kind of show what I think the stitching is. And again, you can see my line's way too thick for that. I'll adjust that later. And so I'm kind of guessing where I think the bottom of this stitch is. Right, so I'll just leave it at that. And then once I have a line drawn, I'll go back to my selection tool here, and that allows me to adjust the line weight, and I can adjust the color of it. Oops. Oh, not that. Okay, and then I can also adjust the opacity of it. Now, I could do one continuous stitch like that. I think it might actually be useful to sort of show where the break is, like where this line goes under that line. So I'm going to actually do it a little different. Delete. Pen tool. So let's like start over here where you can kind of see it a little more. I could go like that. I'll do a little more than that. Show that pattern. Okay, and then, oops, let me do that, right? Enter. Oops, okay. And then after I've placed that line, I can add an arrowhead to it. So again, in the stroke panel, down where it says arrowheads, I'll click on whichever one feels to me the most. Like, and that's way too big, obviously. So I can also scale it down. Way too big. There we go. It's a little more appropriate. I can also scale. It should scale with like the line weight up there. So yeah, we go for like a shorter arrow maybe. And then something like that. And I can also adjust this so it looks a little better. Okay. So I could draw a series of lines like that that kind of show how the stitch connects. Go to the next one. That kind of thing. Add arrows. Okay. Yeah. Also swap which end of the line it's going to, like that. A little bit. All right. So, something like that. We can go in order. Maybe I'll change the opacity of this a little bit. And yeah, so I could kind of like lay out the stitching pattern that way. Actually, it might be nice to even do this as a separate line, like that. Or something. Okay, so that's kind of basics of working with like vectors and stuff like that. One of the other things that I'll just point out is over here we can do something called the mesh tool, something called the gradient tool. So we don't have to just rely on solid colors. If you wanted to do like a fill of an object that had a gradient to it, I could apply a gradient. I'll go to my fill there, apply a gradient. Sure what, oh, down here, sorry, where you see the gradient tool. And again, if I go to Window and Gradient, you should see that tool appear. And over here, I can adjust like the what this gradient is made up of using these bars, and I can double click to make things colors, put RGB here, for example. So I can do things like that. And if you ever wanted to make a more complex gradient, you can also use the mesh tool. So inside of this box, I could add points like so. And then if I use the direct selection tool and click on any one of these anchor points, sorry, I can go to the color panel and I can change the color of that particular point, right? Select them all and make them a certain color first. And then I could start to make adjustments to that. If I wanted to kind of illustrate something more complex than just a kind of bar from one side to another. And I should point out you can also move these anchor points around and make adjustments and stuff like that. So you could kind of draw shapes and everything like that using this tool. That can be kind of a helpful thing. Okay, and then once you're kind of done, so again, you can unlock this if you wanted to. I could also go to Object, Unlock All to unlock that original spiral that I drew. And once I'm kind of done with this image, I would save it as an Adobe Illustrator. So I'll go to File, Save As. I'll save it as type.ai. That's an Adobe Illustrator sign. File, I should say. I'll call this my just click OK. So that maintains all the editing that I've done, so I can still go back and like grab these lines, I can change this image, I can do all that kind of stuff. And then if I wanted to export it to like a PDF, if I wanted to make it a PDF or like a JPEG or something, I can go to File, Export, Export As, and I can save it as a, down here I could save it as a PNG, I could save it as a JPEG, and yeah, so if I wanted to go to a PDF, I could go File, Save As, just choose Adobe PDF, save it. That. Now I could open it in Adobe Reader or something like that. Okay, so that concludes this video.